All right, let's get right into it. We're going to unpack a conflict that literally brought the entire world to a standstill. I mean, this was a war that for a few super tense weeks felt like we were all just counting down to doomsday. Okay, so picture this. It's April 7th, 2026. The world is just holding its breath. Why? Because there's this terrifying deadline from the American president hanging over Iran. And we're talking just hours left on the clock.
And then, bam, this single, absolutely chilling social media post goes out. The most powerful man in the world basically just signaled that the gloves were off. I mean, can you imagine? The whole world just braced for something unimaginable. A lot of people were fearing a nuclear strike wasn't just possible, it felt imminent.
So, you gotta be asking, how on earth did we get to this point, right? Well, to really get a handle on just how heavy that threat was, we need to rewind a bit and look at the absolutely devastating human and nuclear cost of this war so far.
So, since this whole thing kicked off on February 28th, the conflict has already claimed over 4,000 lives. And that's not just in one place. We're talking people in Iran, in Lebanon, and among both Israeli and American forces.
And here's something really important the source material points out. It's so easy to just see that as a cold statistic, right? But it's not just a number. It's this massive web of human tragedy. We're talking over 7,000 families completely shattered by all this violence.
But the really dangerous part, the flashpoint that could have changed everything, that was the repeated bombing runs near the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Now, you gotta understand, this is Iran's only operating nuclear facility.
I mean, a direct hit there, that wouldn't have just been a military strike. No way. We're talking about a potential Chernobyl-level catastrophe. The Prime Minister of Qatar put it bluntly, it would have poisoned the entire Gulf region. No water, no fish, nothing. For generations. Okay, so right in the middle of all this escalating chaos, something truly dramatic happens on April 3rd. It's an event that not only challenges America's claims of total air superiority, but it also kicks off one of the most unbelievable rescue missions you've ever heard of. See, this wasn't just about a downed pilot. This was a big deal. The Iranians capturing a high-ranking American officer, a colonel, someone who could have access to critical intel, that would have been a catastrophic blow for the U.S. We're not just talking a PR nightmare. This was a strategic loss that could have literally altered the course of the entire war. The stakes? Absolutely sky high.
So get this. This airman, injured, manages to hike up to 7,000 feet. He finds cover and sends out a signal that at first totally baffled U.S. intelligence. They're thinking, is this for real, or are we walking into an elaborate Iranian trap?
The message was just 3 simple words. God is good. Once they authenticated that, it was all systems go. It triggered one of the most audacious, incredibly risky rescue operations you can imagine. Deep inside enemy territory.
So, the mission itself was a success. The airman was extracted. And while President Trump was quick to declare it a total victory, the reality on the ground was, well, a lot more complicated. Yeah, they got their man, but it came at a high cost. Multiple U.S. aircraft were damaged or even destroyed. It was a really clear sign that Iran was far from being defeated.
Okay, so that's the battlefield, but at the exact same time, you've got the diplomatic front, which was, believe it or not, every bit as chaotic and unpredictable.
Remember that end of civilization threat? Well, before that, the U.S. had already issued 4, count them, 4 separate deadlines for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. You know, that vital channel where a huge chunk of the world's oil comes from? And what did Iran do? They ignored every single one.
So just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a deal just materializes out of thin air, brokered by Pakistan. You can almost hear the entire world letting out this huge sigh of relief. But that relief was incredibly short-lived. The agreement started falling apart almost the second it was signed.
So what was the problem? It all came down to a fundamental disagreement about what the deal actually covered. See, Iran and Pakistan, they thought they'd secured this broad, regional truce, for Lebanon and all other countries. But the U.S. and Israel, they saw it differently. To them, the ceasefire was only with Iran. So as soon as it was announced, Israel unleashed its deadliest bombing campaign yet on Lebanon, and the U.S. basically said, hey, that's not a violation. That front wasn't covered.
And when the actual peace talks finally started in Islamabad, they just hit a brick wall. It all came down to one thing, the nuclear program. The U.S. demanded Iran suspend all nuclear activity for 20 years. Iran's offer? Just 5 years. That 15-year gap? It was just too big. It proved to be completely unbridgeable.
So, with diplomacy basically in shambles, the conflict didn't just pick up where it left off. No, it started to expand, pulling other major global and regional powers into its increasingly dangerous web.
The U.S. imposes a full naval blockade on Iranian ports. Now you've got this double squeeze on the Straits of Hormuz. The fallout was immediate. China warns the U.S. not to mess with its oil shipments. Then Iran fires on 2 Indian ships. All of a sudden, the economic shockwaves are hitting capitals from Beijing all the way to New Delhi.
But okay, amidst all this widening chaos, there was one tiny glimmer of hope, a small diplomatic win. The U.S. actually managed to broker a separate 10-day ceasefire just between Israel and Lebanon. It paused one of the most violent parts of the conflict, which was huge, even though, it's worth noting, Israeli troops did stay put in southern Lebanon.
And that brings us right back to where we are now. That main 2-week ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, it's set to expire on April 22nd. And just like that, the clock is ticking all over again. And you know, what's complicating any path to a lasting peace? Things like this new Israeli law. Basically, it allows the death penalty for terrorism-related offenses, but it explicitly only applies to Palestinians in the West Bank, not to Jewish Israelis. Its critics have called it one of the most discriminatory laws in the world, and you can see how it just deepens the divisions and makes you question the long-term goals of everyone involved. So in the end, we're left on a total cliffhanger. The ceasefire is ending. All the key players are pulling in different directions. Can some frantic last-minute deal prevent this whole thing from exploding all over again? And here's the bigger question. Even if they do strike a deal, in a region this volatile, with this much bad blood, would a fragile peace even hold? That's the question we're all left with.